Damaging artifacts. Introduction. The face of evolutionary scholarship, that is the public view, the public image of evolutionary scholars, and I know some of them first name, a number of the world's leading atheistic evolutionary scholars have been to this museum because they know there's evidence here that has to be addressed. The face of evolutionary scholarship, exposed to public view, is one of a sincere effort to discover the truth about life origins, how we got here, how living things got here, how the universe got here. However, to those involved in behind-the-scenes efforts, there's an entirely different set of rules and guidelines. Stephen M. Stanley of Johns Hopkins University wrote, "There's an infinite variety of ways in which since 1859, when Darwin published his Origin of Species, the general concept of evolution might have been demolished. Consider the fossil record, a little-known resource in Darwin's day. The unequivocal discovery of a fossil population of horses in Precambrian rocks would disprove evolution." He went on to say, "More generally, any topsy-turvy sequence of fossils would force us to rethink our theory, yet not a single one has come to light." Really? That's stunning. As Darwin recognized, he went on to say, a single geographic inconsistency would have nearly the same power of destruction. Well, that's what's said on the surface. But we're going to be talking about and exposing publicly some artifacts that do exactly that. Haeckel's embryos are classic fraud. Now you'll see in a moment how pitiful that really is. In his Origin of Species, chapter 14, Charles Darwin wrote that the leading facts in embryology, which are seen as second to none in importance, should be considered by far the strongest single class of facts in favor of his hypothesis. Now, wait a minute. Charles Darwin, who has affected every person in this room, and every person in the educational system of the globe for the last 100 years. He affected me. Charles Darwin wrote that second to none, in fact leading in importance, for him to be able to justify his evolutionary theory was Haeckel's drawings of embryos. Pretty important. Or were drawings. Darwin is captivated by Haeckel's drawings of select vertebrate classes, particularly the astounding similarity that he depicted among their early embryonic stages in what Haeckel called the biogenic law, or recapitulation. This simply means that embryonic growth of the fetus within the womb rapidly repeats the entire evolutionary history of the species prior to birth. Now, that sounds very intelligent. And if it were true, it might convince a sophomore in high school in Dublin High School that evolution was true. And it did. And here are his drawings. At the top, we have the beginning embryos. You can't tell the difference between these. But then they change a little bit, and then one produces a fish, a salamander, a turtle, and a pig, a chicken over here, and a pig, and a goat, and a little baby boy named Johnny. But they all start out just like that. And intermediates, they still look a lot alike, so they're really retracing how they all came to be. You're going to see in a moment that leading evolutionary scholars have admitted that this is so even though it's been proved to be absolutely wrong many times. Haeckel's own contemporaries in his lifetime at the university in Germany actually reprimanded him, and he received some loss of compensation by the authorities at the university because he had perpetrated fraud. But what we really see is erroneous exaggeration. Now these are from scholars making the statement, not only did Haeckel add or omit features, he also fudged the scale to exaggerate similarities among species, even when there were tenfold differences in sizes. At the top, we were supposed to all look alike as eggs. Now, wait a minute. We didn't look alike at all. And the sizes are entirely different. And then the division. They divide completely differently from the beginning, just a few hours after fertilization or conception. Then they look entirely different, entirely different, entirely different, and finally the product is entirely, they never were similar at all. Never. So, yet this falsified information is still used today. Dr. Walter Bach, Department of Biological Sciences, Columbia University. Evolution by Ardy Law, and published in Science magazine, wrote, "The biogenic law, Haeckel's drawings, has become so deeply rooted in biological thought that it cannot be weeded out in spite of its having been demonstrated to be wrong by numerous scholars." Damaging artifacts. But who's listening? Now, there are some genuine artifacts, by and large, ignored by evolutionists or inadequately explained by evolutionists, and let's see what they are. They're very damaging. First of all, star formation. Now, the evolutionists like to point to the fact that many of the galaxies could be billions of light years away, and they could. This morning I tried to explain that briefly, in that Einstein demonstrated that mass, space, and time are all interrelated, or space, mass, and time are all interrelated. If you were able to stretch the fabric of space, you would mature mass and dilate time if you could simply stretch the fabric of space. In the book of Genesis, referred back to from Isaiah and Psalm 104 verse 2, during the creation week, God stretched out the heavens like a curtain, like a tent to dwell in. Also in Isaiah 40 says the same thing. Then early in the flood, 2 Samuel 22 states that God stretched out the heavens again. In Psalm 18, same parallel passage, God stretched out the heavens. If you were able to stretch out the heavens, you would mature mass. Mass would get a lot older fast. And you would dilate time. Time would run very fast. A lot of time run in a very short time. Dr. Russell Humphreys has demonstrated, are you awake? We get kind of deep. That we are at or near the center of the universe. And at the center of the universe, there's a gravitational well. All of this has been demonstrated academically in astrophysics and geophysics. A gravitational well, so that time runs on a normal chronology. But the farther out in space you go, if you were to stretch that space fabric, time would run on a very accelerated clock, and mass, substance, would mature very, very fast. So all within 6,000 literal years, all within that time, by the stretching of space fabric, particularly in deep, deep space, you get deep time. You could have billions of years, light years, having expired, and at that time, billions of light years of mass having matured. And the Bible anticipated that long before we ever had any idea about what was going on. So the Bible gives the answer. And David Bassett, would you probably agree with me that That is the biggest single hurdle to overcome by evolutionary thought. I was reading a paper this week on the plane coming back from Detroit. In the newspaper, I was reading the newspaper in the USA Today, and one of the leading evolutionists said, well, the creationists, there are at least 40% in America that believes that the earth and the universe are about 6,000 years old. How can they believe that when we know that some of the stars nearby are at least 100,000 light years away? Those people are just not with it. Well, but we are. We had the answer before they knew how to ask the problem, ask the question. And the answer was in the Word of God all along. And then these artifacts in the geologic column show that that column does not represent 600 million years of evolutionary development, but instead represents the sedimentary deposits during the flood. But let's look at another artifact that is just almost ignored universally by astrophysicists, not by all, but by some. Star formation offers an impossible riddle for the evolutionist. Astronomers estimate that there are over 100 billion galaxies, at least, each with over 200 billion stars, at least. If the universe is 20 billion years old, as estimated by the evolutionary community, watch. Calculations show 31,746 stars per second. 31,000 would be required to form throughout the history of the universe. We've never seen one star form, but we've seen them die.